Welcome to Keys to the Future, the podcast where we explore the stories, insights, and ideas that inspire the next generation of STEM leaders. I'm your host, Gabby Coe. Today, we're diving into one of my favorite topics, curiosity and innovation. My guest, Jane DeRochers, is an academic engineer by training, an innovation champion by trade, and as she says herself, a curious kid at heart. She thrives at the intersection of academia and industry, where she helps translate research driven discoveries into real world solutions. Jane's story is all about connecting ideas, people, and opportunities, and I can't wait to share it with you. Jane, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Gabby. Great to be here.
So let's start with your journey. You've described yourself as a curious kid at heart. And how has that curiosity shaped your path from academic engineering into becoming an innovation leader?
Yeah, well, thank you, Gabby. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when I look back, or when I have to succinctly sort of describe myself or my career to people that I've just met, it really feels like this sort of like really random, sort of windy kind of path. But the through line has really been just an insatiable curiosity, I think. So, um, I started off in engineering. I did a mechanical engineering undergrad, and then I went off and did two more. I love school so much. I did two more engineering degrees. I got a PhD in biomedical engineering. Most of my research career was focused on real primary curiosity driven research. So it was really about sort of foundational understanding of skeletal tissue. So I did a lot of research on, nanoscale mechanics of cartilage in an effort to better understand how structure and function sort of work together to make healthy tissues, or to keep tissues healthy, so that when other folks and other research teams went on to, for example, develop tissue engineered biomaterials for tissue engineering repair of following joint injuries like ACL tears or things like that. um that these innovations would be based on a thorough understanding of how tissues actually are built and behave in the body. um and then in parallel with that sort of primary research, I did a lot of teaching on engineering education. So these are my sort of like two loves, if you will. I really had this deep love of teaching, and then I had this real sort of curiosity, and my grad work really kind of allowed me to do. I had great supervisors that provided me with the agency to really kind of come up with my own research questions, build the teams around going and solving these problems, and then sort of in parallel, um, you know, teaching students and folks about engineering design. So really kind of in a way at kind of both ends of the academic sort of innovation pipeline, if you will.
Oh, that's
And that was
amazing. That's really
yeah.
amazing.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I feel like when I look back to, like, I wasn't one of these people that had this. I wasn't a goal oriented
Oh.
career person per se, right? I do feel like in a lot of ways I'm a goal oriented person, but my career was not sort of like I'm at A, I want to get to B. It was more like, here are the opportunities that are kind of in front of me at the time. What else can I sort of pull together to build a thing that makes sense, that seems worth pursuing in the
Right.
moment? It's
Yeah.
gonna be very
And it sounds like you had opportunities to grow, right, as well, right? So like you said, maybe you had an overall plan, but not necessarily, going from step one to step two. And when you had an opportunity, you kind of seized the moment and grew in that area, which is, I think that's just amazing. And, no career, there is no really career plan, right, that you need to stick with, because opportunities come up, challenges come up, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, in some ways I really admire people that have, and I know them, right? And I worked with lots of them that had an end goal and they went for it. And I always thought, wow, that's really cool. But that just wasn't my story. It was more
Yeah.
like sort of the 2 or 3 year, this feels like I can really add value to this research group. It's a thing I want to learn. foundationally for myself, it was very much anchored sort of throughout of like, are these problems that I want to be a part of solving? So I think, for example, like one of my sort of very first pivots, if you will, would have been from, graduating from a mechanical engineering undergrad in the early 2000s in, the province of Alberta, which was the energy economy of Canada, still is. And almost all my classmates went to like fairly financially lucrative careers in oil and gas. And that was the sort of de facto kind of expectation for my graduating class at the time. But that was just not that wasn't my monkey, if you understand. Like, it was just
Right.
sort of not. There was a ton of value, there was a ton of need, but those were problems that other people were a better fit for solving, and it wasn't the thing that I really wanted to do. And this
Right.
sort of like Venn diagram of health and engineering was kind of the world that I wanted to be in. And so
Yeah.
and so that's what I did.
That's amazing.
So yeah, and then I just sort of kept going because there were more opportunities that just converge. So, the right kind of recipe of time and place and opportunity and building and agency and good people around me and kind of all of those things. Just that was really what drove my career. It wasn't necessarily the sort of North Star of I want to be the
Right.
CEO of this
So
thing or
it
whatever.
sounds
Yeah.
like your career has taken you away from engineering, right? Somewhat. But what parts of
Yeah.
your engineering education have been most useful to you throughout your career? And also, I'm thinking, are there any parts that actively got in the way?
Yeah. Great question, Gabby. So this is really interesting. This is something that I've been thinking about quite a lot, actually, because we can talk about this maybe in a little bit. But I've started a project. It's called Iron Stories. It's a collection of personal experiences and then research from the literature about engineering identities for engineers, particularly in Canada. So I've been doing a ton of thinking about sort of what it means to be an engineer, both in the personal identity space and then also in the professional identity space, and then how those two things overlap. So yeah, I mean, I think for myself, I'm not a practicing engineer. I was never a practicing engineer in the eyes of the licensing bodies in this country. I never got a professional engineering designation. Um, but I've always felt like an engineer. I've always felt like I exist in the world as an engineer. I think honestly I did when I was 5 years old before I even had an engineering degree, right? And so I think, yeah, I mean, the just sort of the structured frameworks of an engineering degree work well with my brain, and those I I sort of fortified through my engineering education, I would say, and then I've carried them through really to all the things I do, including parenting for better or worse. Or just like, yeah, I mean, just sort of all of the things. So I mean, I really think engineering really is like it's the it's the best first degree that a person could go and get. Like, again, like I didn't
Yeah.
have a quote unquote engineering career necessarily, certainly not a like well sort of squarely in the middle of the box type of engineering career. Um, but I think the way that we're taught like rigorous problem solving, I would say just really super high level is the thing that has served me just so well in research, in innovation, in sort of building up big ecosystems as well as in solving really intricate technical problems. I had a supervisor when I was in grad school say something along the lines of like, you can teach, he was a scientist, but he said, we can teach the engineers scientists. It's way harder to teach the scientists engineers.
Oh, that's
And that was his
interesting.
perspective for what it's worth. But I think it's just the ability to learn is another thing that like engineering
Yep.
school is so hard.
Hard.
So hard. It's a thing that like, I mean, we all want to valorize the hero of the like one person that does everything themselves, and that's not the reality. Nobody can survive engineering school on their own. So I think
Right.
teamwork was another big thing, right? The just sort
Mhm.
of collaborative kind of survival
Yep.
imperative was something that was really important. I think it's still underemphasized in engineering education, even though there's a push to make the engineering classrooms and whatnot more collaborative and just realistic in terms of sort of how teams work in the workplace. But I still think there's probably room for improvement there. I've been thinking about this question quite a bit too with some of the research that I've been doing for Iron Stories, and this is the idea that it's probably factual to say that we tend to be more cerebral than sort of partner-driven individuals. Right? We do feel more comfortable in our heads than in our sort of feeling spaces to begin with. But then I
Right.
also think that both in engineering educational environments and then also certainly my experience in sort of in and out of engineering and engineering adjacent workplaces and also just sort of STEM more broadly, we are explicitly conditioned away from engaging with our own emotional intelligence. Still, again, there has been improvement more recently, but there's still so far to go. And I think that is something that looking back, as I try and do more creative pursuits, that's a thing that I feel sad about, if I'm honest, that
Yeah.
I haven't worked that muscle out, or I've been like explicitly conditioned away from engaging with that sort of side, that creative side of myself, or that emotional side, which is where imagination comes from, right? Like you
Yeah,
don't get
right. And so
imagination
do you
without.
think that got in your way, or
I do think it
that is
got in my
getting in
way.
your way? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's a necessary condition for logical problem solving, right?
Yes.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
But the world is not a logical problem solving place
Yes.
entirely. You know
Right,
what I mean?
exactly.
And so it's sort of one of these things. It's like, yes. And then on top of that, Gabby, I think that the research training that I got made that effect even stronger, because in academic research, we do not utter a word that we can't defend with data. No
Oh, right.
academic,
Mm-hmm.
no academic ever gets training to say a single word that they aren't able to back up with robust and defensible data, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
and so when you are trained in that way, again, it is imperative for logic and
Empirical
rational
data, right?
science.
Yes, exactly.
However, when you try and kind of expand that work out into work with real humans, for example, or in sort of reflective analyses of kind of careers, let's say, or something like that, which is some of the work that I've been doing more recently, or you want to engage with kids, that can backfire, I suppose. And so I've just been noodling about a lot of these kinds of questions recently, and they're interesting. I don't have any answers necessarily, but
Yeah,
I
but
think
I mean, I do
there's
agree
just
with you
space.
that engineering teaches us a systematic problem solving ability, right? Like looking at a problem and then kind of defining what things and steps you need to take to kind of come to a solution. So
Mhm.
I think that's a very valuable skill that even if you're not practicing, engineering on a daily basis, I would argue that you are, if you're solving any problems, even if small problems at home, or
Yeah.
you're really looking at it from that perspective. And so those are very foundational engineering skills,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And that's exactly why I will tell anyone who asks that engineering is the ultimate first degree. Whether you want to go into medicine, whether you want to go into law, whether you want to go into
Hmm.
any of the more creative arts, if you can you can sort of like hold
Yes.
on to your emotional self sort of through all of that, and like at least by a thread. Um then it really does, in terms of just sort of a foundational way of understanding the world around you. Yeah, that.
Absolutely. You've been talking about, the pivots that you've taken in your career. And
Mhm.
what have you learned about making those big pivots that might be helpful for our listeners? What advice would you give them?
Yeah. Okay. So first, I love how you position this as a pivot, because I think I can see it now that I'm middle age, and I can look back on a bit of a career, right? I can see it. I think, even 5 years ago, I would have had a hard time calling it a pivot and not seeing it more sort of self-disparagingly as quitting. And I
Mhm.
think sort of normalizing career transitions as pivots as opposed to as quitting is really important. So I just want to sort of call attention to even that which I think is really critical. Um, because quitting isn't inherently wrong, but it gets a bad rap, right? We think
Yes.
we equate quitting still with weakness, or
Yeah.
we confuse changing course or transitioning sort of from the sort of path of least resistance often with quitting, and then we equate quitting with failure. And then so
Right.
then you put the two together and you think any change is failure, and that just doesn't make any sense,
Right.
right? Except for we all do it. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love you said, or I think I saw it on your website. Women don't quit. We pivot. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one of the pivots that I've done recently, if we can sort of swing that direction, was I said yes to a project about a year and a bit ago, I think now, to write a few chapters for a book. And the book has been published, it's out now. So the book is called Beyond the Pipeline. I have it right in front of me.
Mhm.
We're on video. This is what it looks like.
Oh, nice.
But maybe you can flip it around. So yeah, that was really cool, right? The serendipity of our lives is sometimes really a fascinating thing. But I came across this project. It was posted on LinkedIn by a colleague, and I was in a phase of a career sort of transition phase where my approach to work was just to say yes to cool things, and so I did. So a woman named Cassie Leonard, she was an engineer for Boeing, worked for Boeing as an aerospace engineer for 15 or so years. Had sort of merged off that aerospace engineering career path, wrote a book during COVID called STEM Moms, and then decided that there was more to it, that she loved writing and she wanted to do a much bigger project. So she pulled together an international collaborative of authors, 12 or 13, I think,
Wow.
co-authors. We all wrote a couple of chapters each on um this idea of the leaking pipe for women in STEM. So the leaking
Mhm.
pipe is this sort of visual metaphor that really kind of took off in the 80s and 90s. It was symbolic imagery to call attention to the fact that you can sort of jam as many women as you want in the inlet, if you will, in the inlet of the pipeline. So these would be undergraduate, degree programs in STEM, and you can get to relatively close to parity, right? So in the
Right.
80s and 90s, they would have binarized the genders. They would have only sort of had two, but you can go 50-50, let's say. But by the time you get to the sort of quote unquote other end, so this would be, tenured faculty if you're thinking academic. These would
Right.
be CEO level type
Mid-career. Yeah.
people. If you're thinking industry, we're down to, depending on what vertical, what discipline you're talking about, sort of under the broad umbrella of STEM, you're at like 8 to 20%. So the
Right.
leaking
Wow.
pipe
Yeah.
is sort of this analogy of like that women are just somehow sort of passively dissipating,
Right.
out of the pipe. But what she did, which I really loved, was the approach to the book was to blend human personal reflections. So the reflections of the humans behind, like in the pipe, if you will, with
Mhm.
research. So from the literature. So it was this weaving together
Ah.
of the sort of population level realities that would have been in the literature. So from white papers and journal articles and Harvard Business Review reports and things like that.
Mhm.
But also the humans in the system. So these were mostly women, and then there were a few authors that were of other genders as well. But really to describe this more sort of holistic kind of like reality of experiences of women, sort of from both, across the spectrum of sort of age and seniority levels in STEM, and what it's actually like. And so the Women Don't Quit, We Pivot statement kind of came
Right.
out of my first chapter in that book, which was really just taking a look at sort of the history of the leaking pipe, and how the metaphor kind of came to be, and some problems with the um the sort of oversimplification, if you will, of that type of analogy. So that was a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool project, I guess. So I mean, in terms of sort of what's useful to your listeners, if we can get back to that original question. So I guess what I would offer there is really about sort of what might be useful to the listeners. I think like the big career pivots that I've made. I did engage with, a couple of years ago, I engaged with a career coach. that was really helpful. I think like
Mhm.
we've sort of discussed kind of at the top of the episode was more sort of like I think like if we really over reduce kind of people into kind of two categories of career seekers, maybe there's the oriented folks. I feel like then there's the values driven folks that are like, I'm really
Mhm.
kind of anchored, and I feel like I sort of fit in the second category better than the first, which is to say that like my career decisions have really been motivated not so much by kind of future oriented goals, but more by sort of current values. And
Oh, I
and so
see.
when I worked with a career coach, he really helped me sort of like excavate what those values
Yeah.
are. So I think, I mean, again, my engineering brain would go to like sort of pushing and pulling forces. So I think like frameworks for decision making, I think are
Right.
really helpful when we're kind of in this like very kind of unanchored, destabilized sort of state where you might need to get into or you need to you need to sort of go somewhere else, but you're really having a hard time kind of vectoring kind of what way. And so I think of like pushing and pulling forces, right? I think like anytime we sort of feel in our bodies like we need to make a change, there's often a certain amount of sort of pushing and then there's a certain amount of pulling, right? We're sort of pulled
Right. Right.
toward other opportunities or we're pushed from situations that have become unacceptable in some way or another.
Right, right.
And
And I
that I
really
think
find that interesting that you say some people are goal oriented versus, value oriented, right? But I mean, I think that maybe it's a different way of looking at goals because if you're value oriented, I mean, that can be the goal, right? The certain value that you're after, and then putting the steps to get there or to achieve that value that you're looking for.
yeah.
What would you say to
No,
that?
I totally I'm nodding so much because I really and I love that you've pointed that out. I wholeheartedly agree because our goals need to be motivated by our values, right? Otherwise, like,
Right.
what actually is it? Really, like, what is a goal if it's some sort of external pressure? It's not actually a
Yeah.
goal if it's not generated by some sort of like, value
Motivation.
driven
Yeah.
compass of some sort that
Right.
unique sort of inside each of us. So yes, absolutely. So I think I suppose then maybe a better framework for that is more like a time orientation because
Yeah.
um I mean, there's certain goals that are more sort of future oriented as
Hmm.
opposed to sort of present needs. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
different way of looking at it too.
And you mentioned
Yeah.
also that you have worked with a career coach. But I'm also curious, have you had any other mentors, type of mentors that kind of guided you along to, make some decisions or at least gave you data to make those informed decisions and, make that pivot?
The mentor question is interesting because in some ways, like, it makes me really, if I'm honest, no, I don't have like a mentor
Hmm.
in mind, which makes me feel a little bit sad that I can't sort of bring up, a person or sort of a small handful of
Hmm.
people that I would kind of call mentors. Honestly, like the biggest influences from on my career have been from
Hmm.
people totally outside my field. I feel
Oh,
like
really?
that's where yeah, honestly, I really do. I think like the people that I've leaned on for kind of the help me understand what to do next types of conversations where a mentor would kind of fit that type of
Right.
need have been like really close friends and sort of colleagues, but peripheral to my kind of
Right.
direct field. And I've been thinking about this too, because I think the reason that I find that type of influence so valuable is in a way it's sort of the like expert toolbox beginner mindset kind of
Hmm.
value, but applied to like career direction. Cause I think like
Right.
I mean, most of my sort of friends and closest colleagues are in this sort of mid-career stage like I am, and so they have this collection of experience in a professional setting of some description, right? And maybe it's law, medicine, teaching, something that's not sort of like really sort of hyper science STEMmy kind of stuff or engineering. Um, but they don't have the biases, they don't have the assumptions, they see things that would otherwise be invisible to me because I swim in those waters.
Right.
you know, and
Absolutely.
so they can,
I
yeah,
totally see that. Yeah, I totally see that because the rule of thumb is have about three mentors, right? And why? Because that you have the different perspectives,
yeah,
and they don't really need to be in your field per se, right? Because like say if you're an engineer, maybe you're interested in a certain type of business and you want to get that perspective from a business person,
yeah,
right? And or your close friends, right? Your little tribe or your executive board that you go
yeah,
to like just get their perspective, no matter what their field is in. I totally get that, and I like that because some people think, well, I don't know anybody, or I'm, nervous to ask anyone, or my boss, or my manager, or my colleagues that are in the same, same field. But it doesn't have to be the same field. It's somebody that you can trust and say, hey, look, this is the problem that I'm having. This is what I'm trying to resolve. Maybe find a path, right, and just get you a different perspective that will help you make some decisions.
yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you have any daily habits or practices that keep you sharp, inspired, and ready to innovate?
Keep me sharp. I laugh at that one, especially first week of January, right? Where I don't think
Yes.
anyone feels all that sharp. um, so for a period of time, I ran a portfolio of professional development programming for academic entrepreneurs. So I was responsible for both like really what I would call light touch, so talent development types of opportunities,
Mhm.
webinars and workshops and other kind of like opportunities for entrepreneurial kind of experiences within the university. And
Mhm.
then some more higher touch kinds of things. But I got to run a lot of different kinds of sessions. One of the best ones that I did was run by a person named Cole Nakatani. He runs an organization out of Vancouver called Hydra Labs. And he ran a professional development seminar. And this is going to sound really silly, but it it really changed my perspective on how my day ought to look. So I think most of us are conditioned to think that the only way that we can be productive is to be sitting in a desk typing at our computers, right?
Yeah.
There's like a lot of that, especially if you have a fairly kind of like techy sort of career, right? Where it's like the only
Yeah.
productivity is if you're like creating a thing on Excel or whatever. Um, anyways, he pulled a bunch of literature, so research from the literature showing that like newsflash, everybody, we're not machines. We are humans, and human beings run on energy systems that have circadian rhythms, that have good days and bad days, that have energy peaks and energy valleys, and sort of all the things. And he encouraged us all to do a weekly journaling activity
Hmm.
where we map out both the times in the day or the sort of experiences where we feel like we're in really good flow, right? Okay, so all of our jobs need some kind of flow, whether it's creative flow, whether it's writing flow, whether it's coding flow, or like
Right.
Excel graphing
Yeah.
flow, or data analysis flow, or some other creative thing, right? Um, so both that sort of like positive end, but also like at what time of day are you most likely to pick up your phone and start scrolling, doom scrolling? What
Mm.
time of day are you like really fidgety in your desk, whatever, right? And just
Right.
as like a pattern recognition kind of
Yeah.
activity, and then sort of map that out as a way to kind of like understand your own rhythms and when you're the most productive. And what that catalyzed for me was permission to get up in the middle of the day and go for a walk.
Right.
Dramatic thing if we take that out to the
Yeah.
extreme. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I think in this instance, it was like, if I go for a walk, I come home smarter.
Yeah.
So I serve this human need that I have,
Mhm.
which is to get a little bit of exercise and fresh air. And then I come back and I'm actually more productive. So the sum total of my productivity, even when you take out an hour of the day or whatever, even a half an hour to whatever walk around this sort of like circuit I had close to my house,
Right.
the sum total of all of that output for the day is actually still higher, which is so
Wow.
like the human energy system's nonlinear kind of way of thinking, as opposed to the like just put more gas in the
Right.
tank and
Right.
step on it kind of like
Yeah.
machinery kind of thinking of what humans are. Anyway, so that was one really good sort of trick, was like the permission to just satisfy your human
Yeah.
needs so that
I
you can
love
be
that. Yeah, I love that
Yeah.
because I think you step away from the problem, right? And then you can clear your head and think of it in a different way when you come back. Whatever it is that you're doing, maybe you're having an Excel problem and you can figure it out, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? That you step away from it, even if it's just for a half an hour walk or
Yeah.
lunch or whatever, just to refresh your mind. I used to tell my daughter when she was in high school study and she had a lot of pressure with advanced classes and all, step away from it and then come back. Don't get
Mhm.
so focused into like, oh my gosh, I can't get it, I can't get the answer, I can't get the right answer.
Yeah.
Step away from it and then come back and then refocus your ideas. And it seemed to work for her as well.
Yeah.
So that's good, excellent. So I
Yeah.
am curious here, before we close our conversation, what gives you hope right now about the future of STEM?
I'll tell you how I understand hope. And because, like, surprise, surprise, I've done some research on this too. Um, so I'll tell you sort of how I conceive of hope, and then I'll give you a short example before we wrap up. So to me, hope is this kind of convergence of imagination plus thinking plus doing, right? So
Mhm.
hope is really about imagining a better future of some sort, whether that's sort of small changes or big changes, but it requires some creative imagination. Then on top of that, we have to add some strategy, and then we have to add some execution. That's really hope is an active practice to me.
Mhm.
So when I think about what gives me hope, I think about organizations that are doing really cool things. And so in STEM, I think like really where if we really want to continue to make STEM careers more progressive and inclusive and valuable and better, we have to start way upstream. So the organization that I think about that's like really doing the imagining and the thinking and the doing is one that I volunteer for. It's called Engineers of Tomorrow. So it's a nonprofit here in Canada. It connects engineers or people with engineering backgrounds, so engineering degrees, puts them in Canadian classrooms, and once a
Mhm.
month we go in and we do engineering activities with kids in classrooms. So I'm in a grade 4 classroom right now at a school here in Victoria where I live. And it is the most fun I have. It's the most like work fun that I have
Yeah.
in the month. So I go in the
Yes.
classrooms, I build like we did balloon cars, we did circuits, we did a building exercise. We only did 3 so far, and then I'll do them, for the next sort of 6 months of the school year that are left. Um, but it's really fun, and that's really where I feel like
Yeah.
the inspiration is and where the hope is with, like, connecting with kids, helping them see the value of engineering as a great sort of way of solving the problems that are important to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jane,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your insights. I love how your story reminds us of, that curiosity is not just a personality trait. It's a tool for innovation, resilience, and connection.
Thank you, Gabby. So
And
grateful for our chat.
to our listeners, if you're curious about the world, follow what that spark. Connect across disciplines, embrace challenges, and bring your ideas forward. Who knows, your curiosity could be the key to the future. Thanks for listening to Keys to the Future. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep unlocking your future. Thank you to my guest, Jane DeRochers. Thank you to Roger Co for quality reviews. And thanks to Joe always.